What problems did the Kaiser face while ruling Germany? Kaiser Wilhelm II came to power in 1888. He didn't enjoy working with the Reichstag and fired anyone who disagreed with him. As he was the cousin of Nicholas II of France and George V of England, he became jealous of their empires and wanted one of his own. He wanted Germany's place in the sun. To do this, he thought he needed a strong army and a strong navy. The Kaiser, however, was somewhat an erratic ruler who struggled to focus on one project at a time. Although he had enthusiasm and ambition, he lacked the ability to govern effectively or command the army. The Kaiser had a lot of power. Ministers in the government were only answerable to the Kaiser, and no major decision could be taken without him. He was the only one who could appoint and dismiss the Chancellor and his state secretaries. The Reichstag was permitted to vote on new legislation but could not form a decision. The Kaiser and his ministers had full control over that. While the Kaiser made most of the decisions, political parties were developing, but not even one came close to gaining a majority. In the beginning, right-wing parties would often pass legislations, but by 1914, the left-wing parties gained support due to their connection with the increasing amount of industrial workers. Every state in Germany, 25 in total, controlled its own personal matters, but when the government passed a legislation in various fields such as the army and navy, this control declined. Due to this new legislation, all men were permitted to vote, but government policy was solely controlled by the Kaiser and his ministers. As the middle class was scared of the increasing power of the workers, they were happy with this, and it also meant that the views of powerful people turned nationalistic and were hostile to Jews. This is what created problems. Prussia was the strongest of the 25 states in Germany. 2/3 of the population resided there and over half the territory belonged to Prussia. It held a proud tradition of military activity, and the army swore allegiance to the Kaiser. German foreign policy, which was often concerned with expansion, was determined by the influence of military chiefs. They viewed countries on Germany's borders with suspicion. Democratic systems of government were disturbed by the special status of the army, and though the government and many civilians admired the army, this hierarchy created problems for the Kaiser. The Kaiser dramatically increased the industrial strength of Germany. In 1913, the German industry was second only to the USA. Many natural resources were produced in the Saar, Alsace-Lorraine, and the Ruhr, which were used for war production. By 1914, they were producing 1/3 of the world's electrical goods. Its telephone system was the most advanced in the world. They led in the chemical and steel industries, had produced 17 million tons of steel, had built 85 warships, 23 subs, and its foreign trade was equal to Britain's. As the industrial production grew, more workers were needed, which resulted in a higher population of the working class. And though the German society was dominated by traditional ruling classes and authoritarianism was adopted as a norm in society, the growing numbers of industrial workers did pose a threat to the traditional structure of society. To try and pacify socialist demands, the government introduced old age pensions in 1889. They also introduced sickness and insurance schemes, and nearly 14 million Germans were covered by this by 1911. Workers remained dissatisfied and increased support for the Social Democratic Party, who encompassed a communist ideology. They gained one-third of the seats in the Reichstag in 1912. Although the SPD promised to work with the government, the Kaiser still saw them as a threat and didn't want to give them more power. He was under a lot of pressure to please all classes. In 1898, the first Navy law was passed. It increased the Navy by 19 battleships. In 1900, a second Navy law was passed, which put into place a 17-year Navy extension program. To justify the cash needed for this huge increase, these laws said it was to encounter a threatening enemy, Britain. This is what created problems for the Kaiser. All these factors came together and created problems for the Kaiser, whether they be internal issues or international rivalries and resentment.